Hi, this is Tim Matesky from Atlanta Good Guys coming to you with another episode from Dunwoody, Georgia, and we're in the parking lot here of the Feldman Law Offices, and today my good guy here is Larry Feldman. Welcome,
Hey, Tim.
Larry.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for taking time to come here. And one thing I really like is your tagline, Larry. What is your tagline? You do real estate law and closings and stuff, but you also do litigation and family law. What's your tagline for
Well,
that?
when we're litigating, what I try to tell people is don't get mad, get even. And
So
so
I
that's what
love
we try
that.
and do.
You know, if I'm in the court, I want Larry on my side versus looking at him, because he doesn't get mad, he gets even. So he's a good guy to be on your side. But anyway, today there's a lot to talk about in real estate closings and laws and stuff. But I want to just focus on one specific item here. Right now, I'm working with some investors. It's a great time. The properties, some areas of properties are way down and the rents are still high. So the return on investment in some of these deals is incredible. So a lot of people are getting interested in, hey, it's a good time to be a real estate investor. Now, a lot of people, have the question, should I buy it under my name, hold it in my name? Some people here, I've read a lot of things and heard things that maybe you should be a corporation or a trust or an LLC. So I wanted to kind of just go over that. How should a typical investor, say they want to buy 5 or 10 properties,
Right.
how should they hold on title to it, and what are the nuts and bolts there? What are the things to be aware of, the risks involved, and what sort of protections you really get from that?
It's a good question, Tim, and we're seeing a lot of investor money come into the market right now at this point. So I think you're right. I think the market's probably starting to bottom out when investors are rushing in, and people that I know that do the rental properties say rents are coming back. So I think it is a good time. There's basically two reasons you want to have a corporate structure holding these assets. One is from a tax standpoint. You don't want the corporation to pay taxes and then you pay taxes a second time. So you set up a corporation. The easiest one to set up is something called an LLC, and you speak with an accountant about setting up the actual tax structure under the LLC, and it becomes really, from a tax perspective, a pass-through entity. So the corporation doesn't pay any tax. It passes all the income to the individual, and the individual pays tax one time.
So I should be getting my CPA involved in
CPA
this?
should help you with that part of it.
And then what do you write up the papers and stuff?
What we do is, as an attorney, we help you establish the corporate structure, the LLC, and they can set up the financial structure underneath that LLC. So we set up the corporation, and in setting up the corporation is not very difficult or complex, but there are certain considerations you want to take on doing that. And really, the reason you want an LLC or a corporate structure is for a limitation of liability. And the example I give people is Delta went bankrupt, but the president of Delta didn't lose his own home. That was the company that dealt with the diminution in asset value, but the personal assets owned by the president as a person was separate from the corporate structure. And that is also why you'll find people that are in attorneys or physicians or sometimes architects that potentially have high liability will hold their assets as in a corporate entity. Sometimes that's a trust, sometimes it's an LLC.
So like if I slip and fall on someone's property, and then I go to the courthouse and I see that you have 10 properties worth $1 million, that's a big target on you, right?
Well, that's exactly right, and that's where, and you really get to a financial kind of decision. If you had 100, I'll give you two extremes. If you had 100 properties, you probably don't want to keep them in one LLC. You may want to make, and if you did, you'd want to make sure that that corporate structure was very strong. Typically, you'd want to break it up into smaller groups. If you had the other extreme, you'd put one LLC for every property.
Yeah, I heard that.
And that may make sense. It becomes an individual and financial decision, and it's something that you need to look at. What's the asset values in there? If I have 3 properties that are underwater, it may not matter if there's 3 in that one LLC, because if somebody gets access to that or wins that asset in a lawsuit, they're underwater.
Okay.
So if you there's a way to balance properties that way. May have a couple winners, couple losers, and they net zero. That would be one approach. And the other is just to keep an eye on the asset values and look at your risk. But there's a layer actually between owning that asset and them coming to sue you, and that's insurance. So of course you probably want to talk to an insurance agent for insurance protection based on having renters in that property, because the insurance is going to be your first stop before they even get to your corporate structure. They're going to make a claim against the insurance. Once they break through your insurance, then you look at your corporate structure, and can I get to you personally, or is it a corporate claim?
Okay. Now, when you're talking about possibly having a separate LLC for each individual property, what's the cost of setting up an LLC?
Yeah, the cost of setting up an LLC is not that expensive. I think on a simple one, and you have to understand, you could set up a large corporation that way. And if you or I were going to get in business, and we decide to use an LLC as the corporate structure, we would probably need to set up an operating agreement. Who owns what portion of stock, what our responsibilities are, how we're going to operate, almost a prenuptial agreement on how we're going to run the company. If it's you and I, for the husband and wife, let's say, buying an investment property, you don't need that. You really just need a corporate structure that's going to own the property. Okay. So it's much cheaper, it's much simpler. We typically charge on a simple LLC $500 to set that up. You can get a corporate seal and corporate book, and that's additional money, which is part of what you should have as an LLC, because you want to keep books and records, or you want to keep have regular meetings as part of your corporate structure and record those meetings. So the law says if you want the protections of a corporation, you must behave like a corporation.
Okay. Now that's the other thing. I hear this term on piercing the corporate veil. Now say if you're my attorney and I'm suing this LLC. Now, what, as an attorney trying to pierce that LLC to get to those assets, those personal assets there, what do you look at to try to, make it look like that LLC isn't there?
Well, really, Tim, the key there is it's a multi-factor test. There's no one thing that's going to allow you to have a court say you didn't treat that corporation, you treated the corporation as your personal piggy bank. So we're not going to allow you the protections of a corporation, so that you do behave like a corporation. So the multi-factor test, probably the number one thing, is what they call commingling of funds. And that is if you're using the corporation to pay personal bills. So typically in a lawsuit, you'll get a period of time where you get something called discovery, where I can ask you for documents. And the first thing that's going to get asked for is the books and records of the LLC and your personal books and records. And when they find out that there are charges, that the LLC is making charges to Victoria's Secret, unless you're in a certain kind of business, you're going to have difficulty with that. So you're using the corporation as a personal account. That's really the quickest way to destroy the protection of the corporation. Okay. The other is you should obey the formalities of the corporation. And those are things like have a regular meeting. You can have an annual meeting. You could have it at Longhorn Steakhouse or McKendrick's here in Dunwoody. Have your annual meeting. It doesn't need to be long. You need to record those minutes. You should have an LLC checkbook. You should have title based on the LLC. You should have business cards based on the LLC. You need to run it like a company. And as long as you do those things, you should be in pretty good shape. But I'll tell you, most small businesses do not have regular meetings, and most commingle funds. And those are things that'll get you in trouble the quickest, the commingling funds especially. Probably the best thing is have a corporate credit card and only use that one. But if not, you need to keep accurate expense records. So if I go out and in my closing business, if you buy a house with me, I give you a bottle of wine. Well, when I go buy those bottles of wine, I pay for them individually, but I have to fill out an expense report that says I expense this wine for closings, and I submit it to the company, and the company makes the check to me. That's how it works at IBM. That's how you work in your company.
Now, you say you're mainly a closing attorney. You get a lot of buyers coming in. These investors who you were telling me before that some of these buyers come in with an LLC that they created by themselves, or some other entity created for them. Does that what sort of problems does that cause you, or what do you have? What are the things that you got to look into before you have this closing to make sure everything's all right?
Well, we have to make sure that the LLC is valid, that it's registered with the Secretary of State in Georgia, that it's current with the Secretary of State in Georgia, that there are minutes that approved, say, you as the LLC manager, the authority to buy a property. That we just can't let, because you're an LLC, somebody buy it. There has to be minutes that say we approve Tim or Larry, either officer, the authority to buy or resell property. So you need to make sure all that paperwork's in place. Now, obviously, if we prepare that paperwork and we do the closing, we know it's in place, we know we filed it, and it's a lot easier, smoother. It's smoother, it's quicker, it's easier. There's a lot less time involved. But we many times get it from other places, and we need to make sure that it is, in fact, a valid entity, and that you have the authority granted by that entity, by a board meeting, or by nature being the president, or by the articles of incorporation which established it, that say who gets the authority to buy and sell real estate. And so those are the things that a closing attorney is going to check on to make sure you have the authority to do the deal, if you will.
So if someone sets up a LLC with you, will you kind of send them reminders and keep them up to date and say, hey, it's time for your annual meeting, you need to do this?
Usually what I counsel them is to pick a holiday. Make it July 4th, make it your birthday, make it your kid's birthday, because there's your best reminder that you need to have those meetings. And actually the Secretary of State now in Georgia will send you an email to update your corporate structure. If you're out of date, I just got one on the law office that said, hey, you're going to run out of date in 30 days, and so you send them a check. It's about $50. It's not expensive. So there are reminders out there, and you can do that you could have your meetings on the institution date. There's other ways to get around the meetings, but if you ever get pulled into court, I think you're better off having done the formalities and being able to show that, and it would be unusual because, as I said, most small businesses don't really cover that.
All right. Now, the other thing that I get questions on is, okay, if I'm an investor and I have cash, I'm going to buy a property. Sometimes it's good to have cash in your personal name. You buy the property, or should I buy it under the LLC name? And if I buy it as my personal property, what's the logistics of getting it in the LLC real quickly? Then the other thing is, once it's in the LLC and I want to take a mortgage on it, is there problems getting a mortgage on an LLC, or can I transfer it back to my name, get a mortgage and transfer it back, and what's the cost involved there?
Sure. Well, what you'll find is probably today the quickest way to buy the house is for cash, and probably the best deal is for cash, because so many people are having trouble getting financing. If you want a bank to finance a property as a small investor that has just a few properties, the bank is not going to loan money to the LLC, because the LLC could go bankrupt and they have no recourse. They're going to want a personal guarantee. So they're going to want your name on there individually. So typically what will happen is you'll buy the house in your name and you'll transfer the property into the LLC once you've got the mortgage on it. And as long as the people in the LLC are the same principals that are on it individually, you won't lose your title insurance, which is another factor. So you want to make sure that those sync up and you don't destroy your owner's title insurance when you buy that at closing.
Oh boy, I didn't even think of that.
Little pointer there. And but what'll happen typically is then you'll hold it in the LLC, and then let's say rates go down. It'd be tough in today's environment, but if rates go down, you decide you want to refinance. Typically, we transfer that property out, we refi and transfer it back in, and we do that via something called a quitclaim deed. It's a very effective tool for doing that, and as long as we're controlling the process, it's pretty inexpensive to do it, because we know you're not trying to just transfer property for some fraudulent purpose or to avoid an asset in bankruptcy or something like that. So it's really pretty straightforward, and we can transfer them in and out. And you'll find people that hold the property in trust will end up doing the same thing. They'll transfer it out of the trust, they'll refi and transfer it back in, and that's something that you can handle. We can set all that paperwork up at closing and file all that.
That's all legal. You do it all the time.
Absolutely. Normal course of business.
Okay.
Normal
banks
course of
don't
business.
get upset at that, or
no, as long as, like I said, we have the same entities, and you're on there personally, because they're going to come back to you personally, obviously, at the bank, if you can't pay the mortgage. So it's a common thing.
Okay.
It's a common thing, and that's really how you're going to get the protection on the one hand, and you're going to get the financing on the other.
Okay.
Now there is a financing issue. I'm not a mortgage broker, but I have friends who are, and they tell me that typically they're going to want you after closing to season that loan for about 6 months before they'll want to give you a mortgage. But you really need to talk to your mortgage broker, good guys, and find out what they have to say about that. And I'm sure those rules will change over time.
All right. All right, well, we talked about 10 minutes here. There's a lot of other episodes I want to do with you. There's just as a husband and wife buying property, how they should take title to that. I hear there's like joint tenancy with right of survivorship, but sometimes if you're combined family, 2 family units coming together and divorces and stuff, you want to make sure... So there's a lot of different angles to come
where real estate law crosses into estate planning and family law.
Now you did a lot of family. You still do family law?
I do some a little bit. I do a little bit of family law. I do a little bit of estate work.
Like wills and stuff?
Wills.
Okay.
And it's important to have a will if you own property in Georgia.
Okay.
Because based on how you title the property, which is one approach, you can pass the property upon one of the partner's death. But if you die without a will, and it's not title property, then typically the spouse will get half the property, and any children will split the other half, which is typically not what my spouse wants. I don't know about your spouse, Tim, but I'm sure that's not what she wants.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot. That's in a whole other episode there. Sure. And so if you have any questions, what's your phone number, Larry?
It's 770-393-5855. 4757, and we'll see if we can help you out with any sort of issues.
And then make sure when you call Larry up, tell him that you hear he's a good guy, and then he's going to know that you probably watched this video. And
I'll blame Tim.
All right, thanks
a lot, Tim.
Okay,
right,
until next time, Tim Matesky, Atlanta Good Guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.